Well, we are extremely looking forward to this. I think there's also a little bit of sadness on our behalf because we have thoroughly enjoyed and see the benefit of addressing a topic like idolatry, because idolatry is a constant struggle for people because people were designed to worship. And when you understand that's the purpose, then you're never going to go wrong with it. You are designed to worship. That's why God made you, but he made you to worship him. Our problem is, the idolatry problem is we find things other than God to give our worship towards, our allegiance towards, our attention towards, and that becomes it. But if we stay focused on the purpose, we'll never have a mistake. I was reminded of that as I heard a story. There was a traveler, and I tell you the country of origin just simply because it will make more sense when I do it. He was from Germany, comes over here to the United States, and goes to a Mexican restaurant, gets some salsa, eats the salsa, quote unquote, burns his mouth, and he sues the restaurant for having salsa that is too spicy. FYI, it was the medium salsa, okay, just for context. So this guy from Germany comes over, gets his mouth burnt, and says, I'm gonna sue you. The judge rightfully throws the case out. Why? Because the judge says, part of the purpose of salsa is to have spice. So the guy got no money for it, but the judge appealed to common sense and what is the purpose of salsa? Salsa is meant to be spicy. There are different levels of spice. So if you chose the wrong level of spice, that is up to you. So when you go back to the purpose, when you understand the purpose, you'll never go wrong. I think that's vitally important when we come to the subject of the family. Because if you don't understand the purpose of the family, you are likely to take advantage of one of the great benefits that God gives you as a man in leading a family if you try to usurp it and take it for yourself. So if you got your Bibles, go with me to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1. And you go back to the beginning to find the true purpose of an object. Look at its origin, understand why it was made. Genesis chapter 1. So God creates, shows his sovereign rule over creation. In the beginning, God was, always will be. God is there and he creates by the power of his word consistently throughout the Bible. You see that he does not need evolutionary theory in order to create. He has the power of his word. Hebrews 11, 1-3 says, by faith we understand that the world was made by the word of God. So God is speaking and he's just creating. And every time he speaks, he creates, and then he says it's good. And then he gets to man on the sixth day, and he does a lot of things that are not in line with the pattern of creation that he had done before. And so now he begins to deliberate amongst himself, as you'll see, Genesis 1:26. It says, then God said, let us make man in our image. So there we get hints of the Trinity. You're not going to get the full-fledged doctrine of the Trinity, but already having the Spirit of Yahweh and God mentioned in verses 1 and 2, and here with the multiplication of saying, let us make man in our image, we get hints of what we would later come to find as the doctrine of the triune God. And the triune God made man for a purpose, and he does it different, as we find out in chapter 2. So important is the creation of man and woman that he goes to chapter 2 and gives us a behind the scenes of it. And he says this, let us make man in our image. And now we understand our purpose. The image's purpose is to image the true image that it comes from. If I don't follow, if I'm not a good image, then I don't represent the image that I am trying to image to the world. So man is in this position to be the image. We're created in the image after the likeness of God. And then we are handed over, delegated dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, and over every creeping thing on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. So now we have male and female coming together in God's purpose in his image. And God blessed them in the marriage covenant in the family and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. So that is the fundamental reason for why God gives you the family. When we understand that God does and creates man in his image to give him glory. That's why he did everything. We, as image bearers, have the highest capacity to bring God honor and glory. So we want to make sure that we always understand it. When we understand the purpose, I don't think we're ever going to idolize family. So number one on your outline, why don't you write it down this way? I want you to guard against idolizing your family. Guard against idolizing your family. I'll give you a definition in a moment, but just write that down. Guard against idolizing your family. Because it is so tempting in this environment of the family to crave and lust after things that make us feel good or give us meaning and validation outside of God. And if we use those things the wrong way, we have created an idol. So I want you to guard against that. In essence, each point that will happen coming up after me will help us figure out if that's going on. Let me give you a definition then of the idolatry of family. Look at that first word, using, okay? Using my role in or the people of my family as a substitute for God, as a substitute for worship, as a substitute for the reason I'm here. So if I use my role or the people that I am, have the privilege of overseeing and leading, which we'll talk about in a moment, I use them as a substitute for God. That word using is very, very key because you are using people for your own means and ends to reach something. That is not why God created the family, and that's not why he gave you the role that he did. Now, very briefly, I'll just get you guys to write down these 5 things. They're not going to be on the screen, but you've probably heard a similar list before. Your role as a husband, or if you are here as a single person looking towards marriage, what you are signing up for is this. You are to be the leader of the family. So you can write down leader. You are the clear leader as the head of the family. You're the head of your wife. And so you are the leader. That is why in Genesis chapter 3, when Eve is the one who is deceived and first chronologically sins, Adam has the bigger responsibility because he did not do what he should have done, which was to lead and protect and fight off against the lies of the devil. So Adam is called when God shows up on the scene. And Adam in Romans chapter 5 is given that headship title. So leader, you're also a lover. And we'll talk about that in a moment. You get the privilege of loving one woman for the rest of your covenantal relationship. You're a protector. So leader, lover, protector, and provider. All of those you can see in just these passages. I'll just give them to you real quick. Don't turn there for the sake of time. Colossians 3, 18 to 21 will give you a majority of those. As you lead your wife, you love her, as you take care of your kids. 1 Timothy 5, 7 and 8, talk about how you are to provide for your family. And if you do not provide for your family, you're worse than an unbeliever. Can you imagine looking at your spouse and going, I'm not going to provide for you? Can you imagine looking at your kids and saying, I'm not going to go to work today? Like how selfish, how egotistical do you have to be handed the role of a provider and not do it? That's why God says, if you refuse to do it, you're worse than an unbeliever because that's the role I gave you. So you got leader, lover, protector, provider. But here's the last one that we don't often get said much of, but I think should always be included, and it's the word example, okay? You must be the greatest example in your family of what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. You are to set the pace. That goes hand in hand with leadership, but you must be an example. Because in your leadership, you will point to a direction to go, but if you are not walking in that direction, if you say, family, we're gonna glorify God, but your life is not glorifying to God, then you're gonna create a lot of chaos and harm within your family, and that's probably based off of an idolatry that is there. So I want you to think really intently about that role of a husband to be a leader. But now back to the definition. If I'm using my role in any one of those categories to get pleasure for myself or satisfaction for myself or serving myself, I'm now using what God intended me to utilize for his glory. I'm using it for me, and that means I have an idol and I'm not doing what I should do. So what does that look like? Well, it could look like this, and then these guys will come up here and give us some questions and some helpful scriptures to investigate things going on. It could look like this with your wife. God designed in marriage for there to be sexual pleasure, but you could take that outside of what it's meant to be, a gift of God, and you could utilize it to make your entire marriage based on that. And if your wife does not provide for your sexual needs, you will go outside, you'll look at pornography, you'll cheat on your wife, any one of those things, because you have made the pleasure of the bedroom the be-all, end-all of your marriage. And that would be wrong. That would be an idol that you have. And notice that that would be a selfish bent. All of this, the role of a leader is to be selfless. But that would be a selfish bent that you have of yourself, so you have to guard against that. You could also just crave respect so much that you become domineering. And again, a leader should never be domineering. We'll have comments on that following up. You could also just think of the household culture, okay? What does it mean to have a good culture in your household? It means that the environment should be an environment of grace. If you're saved by grace and God has given you grace, then the environment of the household should be an environment of grace. That means if people make mistakes or even if there's sins, they're dealt with in a proper manner. But these guys will talk about different ways that that can go wrong. Lastly, it could be this. It could be with your kids. Okay, maybe you and your wife are on the same page, and maybe you had struggles growing up with one of your parents, and you're determined you're going to turn the boat around. And often times when that happens, we swing the pendulum too far on one of opposite sides, where I'm over-involved and I'm trying to live vicariously, or I'm the opposite side and I'm too afraid to mess something up that I don't do what God's calling me to do. So if I think of my kids as a status symbol, they must be the perfect cookie cutter version of what a family is, and their academic success, their sports success, that is the most important thing to me. I will drive them that way. You've now got an idol. Or you could think of things like their safety. Oh, I'm going to protect them so much. Maybe you're an overprotective father and you're caring for your daughters that way, or you're solving all your son's problems. That's not helping them. You cannot idolize those things in your kids. We are all images, and images are designed to image the person that they are representing. How many know the name Dwayne Wade? Raise your hand if you know Dwayne Wade. If you don't, he's the one who carried LeBron James to 2 championships in Miami. So just if you need reference point for him. But what you can do is go check out Dwayne Wade, great basketball player, retired from the Miami Heat after 21 years, and they put a statue of him out in front. And if you go look at it, it is probably one of the most mocked statues in the world. Why? Because everyone says, that doesn't look like Dwayne Wade. They go, that doesn't even look human. If you look at the face, it looks so far from anything that Dwayne Wade is. It is doing a horrible job imaging the image of the person that it's designed to. If we go towards idolatry, we will be doing exactly what that image is doing of Dwayne Wade. We'll be making a mockery of God, who designed us to be an image bearer for him and to carry his glory. So what we're going to do now is we're going to toss it over to Pastor Matt. He's going to come up here, talk about the wife. Pastor Nate will talk about the kids, and then I'll come wrap us up here in a moment. Hey, can we welcome up Pastor Matt? Give him a round of applause.
You've probably thinking about a wife and thinking about a spouse, and your mind might go immediately to Proverbs 31. Proverbs 31 verse 10 says, an excellent wife who can find? She's far more precious than jewels. Or maybe another famous proverb, Proverbs 18:22, it says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. But what we did this year by looking at OC Idols, the subtitle of this series is taking a good gift and guarding against making that good gift a God replacement. And so there's no greater gift on planet Earth that God would give anyone in this room other than a wife. He says, far more precious than jewels. He who finds a wife finds a good thing, obtains favor from the Lord. That is the best gift that you could receive. But even that good gift can become a God replacement if we're not careful. So I'd like to invite you guys to open up to Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 to 29, going back to God's blueprint for the home and God's blueprint for what a husband is, what he's called to be. Spend a lot of time in this passage going through premarital counseling. It's a passage that I have every prospective husband and wife memorize, which is good to go back to what our job description is. If you have a wife, that relationship is the most important relationship that you have here on this earth. But it is possible to love your wife in an unbiblical way. It is possible to love her too much in the sense that you take God out of the equation. And what Ephesians chapter 5 does is it brings God very squarely into the equation and says, you should love your wife so much, yet your ultimate priority is God. Where she never supersedes your relationship with God, you're trying to point her that same direction that you're going. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 to 29, let's read it together. What it looks like for us to truly love our wives the way that God would have us. Verse 25, it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing, the water of the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. For he who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but he nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church. What this passage lays out for us is how to love your wife in the appropriate way. How to love your wife in the way that you keep God number one and wife number two. And then Pastor Nate will get up here and explain that kids are number three in that order of priority, in that order of affection. It's possible for you to love your wife and take Ephesians 5 completely out of it. In fact, that's what the world does every day. When two non-Christians get married and they're not thinking about Ephesians chapter 5, they are placing their spouse at the number one pedestal in their heart. And we need to make sure that we guard against that and watch for ways that might subtly happen in the lives of men here in this room. So point number 2, you can write it down this way. I want you to watch for ways you turn your wife into an idol. Watch for ways you turn your wife into an idol. During this series of idolatry, I'm sure that you, along with myself, is sitting under these workshops as well. You look introspectively, you look into your own heart, and you say, whoa, I didn't realize I had that idol in there. I didn't notice that my affection was so deeply for that certain thing. But I word this point this way: watch for ways that it puts the object of the verb in you. You turn your wife into an idol. That is an active thing that you might be doing currently right now if you're not careful. It doesn't just happen out of nowhere. You don't just wake up one day, my wife's an idol now. No, you have been feeding that. What we're going to do is we're going to look at this passage to make sure that we don't do that in a way that we shouldn't. I was thinking about the parable of the talents. Matthew chapter 25, parable of the talents. You've got the 5 talent, 2 talent, the 1 talent servant. We know the story of the 5 talent, the 2 talent. They go out and they go make more. But that 1 talent servant, what does he do with his 1 talent? He takes that talent from his master and he keeps it to himself. In fact, what he actually does is he actually buries it in the ground. But he just takes this gift from this master, and instead of stewarding it, he just takes it and holds it in his hand right here and doesn't do anything with it. If you receive the blessing, the gift of having a wife, and you just stand there and just hold that gift and don't actually steward that gift, what Matthew chapter 25 would say is you are a bad steward. And so to be a godly husband means to be someone that is stewarding this gift well by exercising the proper leadership over her, as Pastor Elliott mentioned a moment ago. The goal is to keep our wives at the number 2 place in our hearts and keeping God at the number 1 place in our hearts. And so I've got some diagnostic questions for you to ask yourself to help you protect yourself from turning your wife into an idol. If you look here at Ephesians chapter 5, it's very clear that the husbands are loving their wives with a direction of their attention to God, where your affection is towards God, and also the number 1 person in your life that you are trying to get approval from is from God, not from your wife. And so the first A diagnostic question I have for you to write down is, would you rather disappoint her or disappoint God? Would you rather disappoint her or disappoint God? If we go back to the core definition of what an idol is, we've put it this way, or it's been worded in different ways, but the core element of what an idol is it's you putting something above God, which means you are willing to sin to get that thing, or you are willing to sin when you don't get that thing, or that is the place that your heart is yearning for security and for satisfaction. But if you look at those first two, you're willing to sin to get it, or you're willing to sin when you don't get it. You might be willing to disobey this call right here in Ephesians chapter 5 of presenting your wife blameless before God one day on her judgment day. You might be taking that out of the equation. You are willing to sin in order to love your wife in whatever definition you've made. I want you to write down Galatians 1, verse 10. Paul talks about people pleasing. And I want you to think about this concept. Paul is talking about the gospel. He's talking about his ministry of the gospel. But Galatians 1:10 says, For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? If I were trying to please man, or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. Our ultimate aim, the person that we care about, their opinion of us more than anyone else, should be God. And when you are in a marriage, you can be transfixed, you can be paralyzed by the opinion of your wife. And you can be paralyzed by disappointing her. And I'm afraid of her, and I don't want her to be upset. And so I make decisions based on, is this going to offend her? Is this going to be hard for her? Is this going to be difficult for her? Will this disappoint her if I tell her that we need to go do this thing instead? What Ephesians chapter 5 reminds you of is your job of leading your wife and thinking eternally, thinking to judgment day. Look at what it says, to present her before God one day in splendor, this is verse 27, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Your goal is the end, that you want your wife to be as godly as possible on the other side, to sanctify her with the word, to present her spotless. You know what that's going to require? Disappointing your wife. There are hard conversations that we as men sometimes avoid because we don't like hard conversations. We are too tired. We are too long of a day of work. It's too late. When I start talking to my wife about this thing, it turns into like 2-hour-long conversation. I don't want to have it. Do you care more about God's approval or her approval? To skip those hard conversations. But there's a temptation of every man in this room when there is a disagreement, an argument, or even a fight, for you in mid-conversation to think, how do I get out of this conversation as quick as I possibly can? Just say, I'm sorry, even if it wasn't my fault. I'm sorry, it's my fault. I did it, my fault. And men do that all the time. You go watch a TV show, go watch a movie, it's all the time the husband, I'm sorry. Now, there are definitely times you need to say, I'm sorry to your wife, and I'm not advocating for you to take that out of your vocabulary. But if you just say, I'm sorry to quit a conversation, to abort mission, when you know she's in sin and you are not going and having that confrontation, then you are seeking, you would rather disappoint her than disappoint God. Ephesians chapter 5 would be a place for you to go turn back to. The next question I have for you is, does her happiness take precedent over her holiness? It's very much piggybacking on that first question there. Does her happiness take precedent over her holiness? And you could fill in the blank, the word happiness there, for a bunch of different synonyms. Her comfort, her security, her safety. What does Ephesians chapter 5 say that your ultimate priority is for your wife? That she stands before God spotless and blameless. And yes, she will have to stand before God and take accountability for her sin, but you will too as her leader. God will look at you and say, how well did you steward this gift that I gave you, this opportunity of leadership? Are you going to be like the 5-talent steward, or are you going to be like the 1 talent? Do you live like the philosophy of happy wife, happy life is the way that you decide, the way that you live your life? Because you don't find that in Scripture anywhere. Happy wife, happy life doesn't show up in Ephesians 5. It says holy wife, happy life, if you will. A joyful life, maybe to use a more biblical word here. If I keep her happy, if I make enough money, if I spend enough family time, if I do enough things that she wants me to do, then that's my priority. Just don't rock the boat. She's kind of scary. And so I just want to keep her happy, keep her comfortable. Don't want to push her too hard out of her comfort zone or push her towards maturity. Some of you in this room are so afraid of your wives that there are conversations right now that you know you need to have that you will not have. And I want you to see that's not what leadership is. That is not what leadership is. That is abdicating your responsibility and stewardship that God has given to you. I want you to picture your wife on Judgment Day. How holy and without blemish do you want her to be? That's on you to have that hard conversation. That's on you to call out that sin. That's on you to help bring her from where she's at right now to being more mature next year and the year after that, all the way until the point when she's standing before God one day. Some of your wives right now are in a lot of sin because you are too afraid to talk about it to her. And there are problems that go on in the church that women will do certain things or say certain things. And sometimes it's like, oh, well, it's the women's fault. That's the women's fault. No, whose fault is it? It's your fault. It's our fault. Your wife's sin, you need to take that responsibility with a greater sense of severity. So to follow up that question, I got another piggyback question off of here. So the third dash here, do you coddle her sins of commission? Do you coddle her sins of commission? A sin of commission is her disobeying a command of God. God says, do this, and she breaks it. She does something that she should not do, a transgression. A great example of this is your wife a complainer? Is she a complainer? Godly husbands will talk to their wife about their complaining and say, hey, babe, we need to really work on this. This is sin before the eyes of God. And yes, you do it lovingly. Yes, you do it in a manner of gentleness, humility. Do you let her complain? Or do you say, she's just venting. She had a hard day, so I'm just going to sit here silently, cover my mouth, and just let her go? You are aiding her sin. You are coddling her sin. It doesn't mean you're the sin police, but you should think of yourself more as a sin tutor. You're trying to help grow her, help mature her away from flunking the test, if you will, to now passing the test. You want her to grow. Don't coddle her sin. And some of you are coddling your wife's sin because you're in habitual sin too. And you're like, well, I can't tell her to stop complaining because I don't complain. Going back to what P.E. just said a moment ago, let's be the example. Let's set the example for our wives in fighting and putting off sins of commission. Of course, if you see the word commission, you probably would also see the word omission. So the next question I have for you is, do you ignore her sins of omission? This one is a little bit trickier. The sins of commission are a little bit more black and white. She is doing something that she should not do. But some of your wives are not doing the things that they should do. Are you ignoring those sins? Your wife's church attendance, do you care that she doesn't show up? Do you care that she doesn't have a service post? Oh, it's not a good season for us. Do you care that she's not fellowshipping with other sisters in Christ? Do you care that she doesn't have accountability? Are you just ignoring those things and saying, yeah, well, life's busy, it's difficult, it's hard. She's tried before. Don't make excuses for her sin. Some of your wives don't read the Bible. Some of your wives don't pray. They have no spiritual disciplines. As a husband, you need to say, hey, let me help you. Not be the sin police, but be the sin tutor. Say, hey, let me show you out of this, and let me lead you this direction. Don't make excuses for her sin. Last thing I have for you under this point is her opinion or her mood the functional leader of your home? Is her opinion or her mood the functional leader of your home? We just said a moment ago, you are the leader. God has given you that gift, that stewardship. Some of you let your wife be the leader. Whatever she thinks, whatever she feels, that's what we're going to do. And I'm not talking about small things like she wants to go to In-N-Out tonight, so let's go to In-N-Out tonight. That's not what I'm saying. That's you being humble and going to dinner where she wants to go. I'm talking more bigger picture. The way that you lead your family, your relationship to church, the way that you raise your kids. Ephesians 5 says you lead the home, but some of you fear your wives, and so she functionally leads the home. Some of you are scared of your wives. If she's having a bad day, then our whole family's having a bad day. Let that not be the case. Be the leader, be the example. But you could also hear these right here and say, oh man, great, I got to get home and I got to. That would be a far overcorrection. Let me explain what I meant by that. I didn't mean, yeah, I saw Josh like, whoa. Yeah, no. What I mean is lead with an iron fist. That was the picture, the word picture there. Okay, well, I'm going to start to go over here, and I'm just going to point fingers all day long. I'm just say, get up, go over here, and I'm just going to go be a leader like that. That's not what Ephesians 5 is telling us to do. Ephesians 5 is telling us to be a servant leader. So as Pastor Elliott mentioned a moment ago, you could idolize that person, the wife, but you could also idolize your role as husband and have an overinflated view of yourself. Point number 3, you can write it down this way. Conversely, don't idolize your role as a husband. Conversely, don't idolize your role as a husband. What do I mean by that? Subpoint A, don't confuse leadership with dictatorship. Prideful men can hear point number 2 and go home and misapply it. Don't confuse leadership with dictatorship. Where you treat your wife like an employee, bossing her around, micromanaging what she does, having no input from her, being harsh with her, being overbearing with her, being paranoid when she does something that you don't want her to do. Colossians 3, the comparison text, the sister text here, Colossians 3:19 says, husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with her. Leadership is not being harsh with your wife. 1 Peter 3 says she's the weaker vessel. We need to love her, but we need to lead her. Tomorrow I'm preaching in 2 Timothy 2, verse 22 to CSM. Flee youthful passions. Flee youthful passions. I think a youthful passion for young men, young husbands in the room is to hear sermons like this, or to hear the reverse sermon of this, wives submit to your husbands, and say, okay, great. Well, okay, that means I'm the leader and I can tell her what to do. Don't confuse this gift of stewardship as you're this boss that you treat her like she's your property. I've already decided everything, and so this is what we're doing. You feel disrespected when she disagrees with you. You're obsessed with being right. You seek to intimidate your wife. You seek to instill fear in your wife to just remind her who's boss. That is not godly leadership. Second thing here, subpoint B, don't weaponize the Bible to get your way. I think that's also another way to flee youthful passions, to view the Bible the wrong way, is I get to use this thing and I get to just tell her what to do all day long. Leadership starts with you being the example, not with you pointing your finger. Leadership can get to your head, and you can use the Bible as a manipulation tactic. Can I just say, just a word of advice real quick? Don't tell your wife. Don't pull the submission card with your wife. Hey, just a reminder, you need to submit to me. Don't quote that verse, okay? Be a husband worthy of submission too. Yes, she needs to do that. That's what verse 22 says. But she could turn around to you and say, well, you're supposed to love like Jesus loved the church, and you ain't doing a great job of that either, buddy. Don't weaponize the Bible to get your way. Yes, you lead with the Bible. Yes, in the whole Deuteronomy 6, we're talking about the Bible along the way all the time. But if you're sitting there with your wife trying to proof text, you disrespect him. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth when you talk to me. That's Ephesians 4:29. Just remind you of that one. Like, don't use the Bible as your manipulation tactic. Lead with Scripture, model it, show her how to do it, lovingly call her out when she needs to. Next thing, subpoint C, is receive her feedback humbly, not defensively. Receive her feedback humbly, not defensively. Being a leader doesn't mean you never take feedback. Being a leader doesn't mean that you never get her thoughts. In fact, funny enough, if you look up the page, verse 21, it says, verse 21 of Ephesians 5, it says, we're submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. And the next verse says, wives, submit to your husbands. So does that say husbands, submit to your wives? Well, not in the headship way, but there's a humility that we must have, we must lead with. If you receive her feedback defensively or you take it a certain way, she might be, or you might be, your own idol. Last thing here, just to sum up this whole passage together, subpoint D, I want you to be a servant and be a leader. Be both of those at the same time. Be a servant leader. And I'd encourage you, again, this is such a loaded text here. I'd encourage you when we're done with this to go back and to read Ephesians 5 and just read it verses, really, you could read start in verse 22, but you could read specifically verses 25 down to 33. Just remind yourself of what your job description is as a husband, to cherish and to nourish her. As Pastor Elliott mentioned a moment ago, I know that not everyone in this room has a wife, and so as you're writing these things down, they're just future-oriented. But I want you to think about these 2 points right here, to think, man, what are the principles in my life, whether it be fear of man, whether it be people-pleasing, whether it be my pride that flares up when people don't do what I want, and start to work on those now. This isn't just necessarily a sermon for the current husbands in the room, but also for the future ones as well. So please also, single men in the room, please be encouraged that a lot of these things you can start to work on now, and this will help you in the future. To work on our pride, which is, again, a sin that we talk about a lot here in this room, to work on our humility, and to make sure that we are godly as well. So let's not make our role of husband as a God, and let's not make our wives our God either. So Pastor Nate's going to get up here and talk more about how to make sure that we don't make our kids an idol as well. So please welcome up Pastor Nate.
All right, men. Well, it is good to be here today. Excited to dive into the Word, and we just want to keep going. As the other two pastors have said, this whole series has been on making sure that we don't turn a good thing into an idol, which we so easily can, and especially with children. Psalm 127 says that children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward. So we do see children are a great thing. They're a great blessing from God, and yet we can take any one of those blessings that are from God and twist them and turn them. That's exactly what we see in the world. I hope you guys know that I care about my children. I care about your children as well. Pastor Matt loves your children. I see the way he works for them. He prays for them. Pastor Elliott also loves your children as well. He just has less interactions with them than we do. But I hope you guys know that. And so everything that we are going to say today, that I'm specifically going to say about children, is out of love for your kids. We need to do this the right way, because if we don't, we're going to take our kids, the relationship that should be there, a beautiful, loving, nurturing relationship, and we're going to turn it into something that God says is disgusting, and I hate that. We want to make sure that we treat this rightly. So if you have your Bible, you can flip open. If you're already in Ephesians 5, flip to the next chapter, Ephesians 6:4. We're going to see the very best thing that we can do for our kids is to lead them in the right way. We don't have nearly as much as husbands get for wives, or even wives get for wives get for husbands, or workers and bondslaves get for their masters. But we have this one sentence that is helpful to look at. So Ephesians 6:4 says this: "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." That is a great summation of what it is to be a father. I am supposed to bring them up in the instruction of the Lord and the discipline of the Lord. I've got those two major areas that I need to make sure I am doing. And that is absolutely antithetical to what the world says. Absolutely antithetical to what Orange County says specifically. What do you see when you walk around? If you were to go and ask the average person, in fact, there are many people who have done this. You can go look at it online. Who are the best role models as parents in the world right now currently? It's in a cartoon called Bluey. If you are parents, you probably know that one. And if you're not parents, you probably still know it because it is so big and it's out there. But what do you see in that cartoon? It is these parents who are all consumed with their children. Everything I do is about them. If I'm working and my children want to play, of course I'm going to put off work and I'm going to go play with them. If they want to do this other game than what I had planned for them, of course, I'm going to love them and I'm going to do this for them. No, God says that is not necessarily what love is. Love is going to include them and listen to them with their wants and their needs and everything, but it's not going to just capitulate, do every single thing for them, drop whatever I have in the world, and I'm here to serve. That is not the role of a father specifically. So as we look at Ephesians 6, we see we are to discipline and instruct them in the Lord. We are to lead them just as you are to lead your wife to Christ, just as you are to put her eyes on him and say, follow him. That is what you are supposed to do with your children as well. So for point number 1, we can just write it down this way. Fight to lead your children, not baby them. Fight to lead your children, not baby them. And I think already by the term baby them, you know some of the things in your mind already. To be a good parent, you're going to do things that aren't very fun. You're going to need to put your foot down. You're going to need to tell them things like no or don't. You need to do that as a father. To be a good biblical father. If you want to really look at an example, do a study on the entire Bible. Just look at how God interacts with his people, what he does with his people. You can look at specifically Moses, what he does with David, what he does with the disciples, all of those different areas you can look at and see, how does God as the father interact with his people, his children that he loves? That would be a great study. We don't have time for that right now, but that would be a great thing to do. One example that you can write down, though, is 1 Samuel 2, verses 12 to 36. 1 Samuel 2, 12 to 36. To know that there are major ramifications to the way that you view the relationship that you have with your children. If you go about this wrong and you make them your idol, and you just capitulate to them, you baby them, God's not okay with that. The world will applaud it. The world will say, well, you're doing a great job. You're just doing your best. God says, no, that's not right. If you know that text, we don't have time to look at the entire thing, but 1 Samuel 2, it's all about, and really chapter 3 as well, and it goes on, and you see the ramifications throughout the book of 1 Samuel. It's really about Eli, the priest, who's supposed to be in charge of his sons, and yet he's letting his sons run rampant. They are sleeping with the women who are helping and aiding in the temple. They are taking the best of the offerings for themselves, doing things that are absolutely unlawful. And God condemns Eli for it. In verse 29 specifically, he says, why then, do you scorn my sacrifices and my offerings that I commanded for my dwelling, and honor your sons above me? That's ultimately what you're doing. If you choose to baby your children, if you choose to not discipline them faithfully, lovingly, you are honoring them above God, and God says, I will have none of that. Go look what he does to this family. He wipes out the entire family. Eventually, the entire line of Eli is gone because of what happens here. God takes it seriously. We need to take it seriously. We've got to look at it. So again, I've got multiple questions here to help us look through. The first little point on here to think about is we need to keep their safety and their happiness in check against their true needs. Keep their safety and happiness in check by and against their true needs. Your children have true, real needs. And yes, we want them to enjoy things. Yes, we want them to be safe. Of course. I'm not saying throw all that out the window. But what I am saying is what's most important. What did Jesus say is most important? Great, you can gain the whole world. You can be super happy. And you forfeit your soul? What is that? Worthless. What if you are giving into lust, as we went through in the Sermon on the Mount? What does Jesus say? It would be better for you to cut off your hand. It would be better for you to pluck out your eye, throw it far from you, than to be in hell. it would be better. Why aren't we treating this relationship that same way? Sometimes we're going to have to do things for our kids that makes them uncomfortable. We're going to have to do things that makes them unhappy. We're going to have to do things that not in huge ways makes them unsafe. Please be safe with your children. But we're going to do things that maybe isn't in their best physical needs. Maybe we're going to have them stay up a little bit later because we're at small groups. We're bringing them to foundations. Yeah, it would be better for them to get to sleep early and to have constant sleep schedules and to always be on it. But you know what? That's not always the case. We can't always do that. What's more important? Is it more important for them to learn about God, to be disciplined faithfully, or is it more important for them to just feel happy and to never have any kind of issues or problems, never any adversity? Which one's more important? You got to know the answer. And you got to hold to what God says. One note on this is back to what we do with wives, because wives, a lot of the time, they will be the ones who really, really want to cultivate this. They will really, in a loving, caring way, want to care for the kids. And that's good and that's great, but that should always be in balance for what the husband says as well. You should be the one pushing your kids. You should be the one doing the things that maybe your wife doesn't really like so much. I really like to throw my kids really high in the air. My wife, not so much a fan. But guess what? I'm going to do that because I'm going to build resilience. I'm going to do things that I know in a safe, somewhat controlled environment, I'm going to push. I'm going to do things. I'm going to tell them to do things. I'm going to tell you, yeah, jump off of that wall. My wife's going to say, don't do that. No, I need them to grow up. I need them to face adversity. And if they fall down, guess what? We're going to talk about getting up when you fall down. We're going to talk about how to handle a scraped knee. They scrape their knee. Okay, it's not the end of the world. I would rather deal with that. A bad husband is going to let their wife take their care and their concern and their safety too far. They're going to baby them. There has to be that balance. It's a complementary relationship. And you don't take it too far the other way as well. Next good question to ask yourself is, how do you schedule and spend your children's time? Just like Pastor Matt said, you are a steward. You have been given this responsibility, and you are in charge of your child's schedule. I don't know if you know this, but your wife is not in charge of your child's schedule. You are in charge of your child's schedule. When you stand before God, you are not going to be able to say, well, my wife was doing that. She handled the kids. She was in charge of all that. No, God says, you're the head of your households. You are the leader. He doesn't say anything to wives here in Ephesians 6. He says, no, husbands, I got specific things for you. You are the leader of your family. That does not mean that you need to, again, go into all the individual minutia of exactly how they're spending every second of their day, but you should be informed. You should be the one making the big decisions. You should be the one, hey, what are we doing for schooling? Are we going to be part of this project or this ministry or this sports or whatever it is? You're the one ultimately that the buck stops with. You're the one who's going to stand before God for it. We need to be involved in that. How are you spending that time? Good sub-question for that to ask is, if a random stranger asked to see your schedule, your calendar, what would they determine is most important for you as a father? What are you investing in most in your kids? Is it, man, they're just in academics all day long, and they're studying, they're going to school, and then they've got after-school programs, and just, man, they're learning constantly. That's what we're all about. Okay, well, what about their spiritual needs? What about their other needs? Everything needs to be kept in balance. What are they going to conclude? What would your kids say if we asked them, hey, do you know why you do these things? Do you know why you're involved in that sports rather than this sports? Do you know why you're in this ministry? Why do you show up on Sunday mornings? Why are you over in Kidsmen? Is it just your parents want a break from you? Is that what's going on? No, they have you here for a reason, because they have allotted this because they know it's important for you to be here. That's what we tell them. I hope that's true. Got to be checking ourselves, checking our hearts, making sure that we are not holding them up and holding them too safe. Another helpful question to look at is your discipline biblical and effective? Is your discipline biblical and effective? And anyone who is going to say, well, I don't discipline my children, and I don't think that's an effective way to do it, I'm going to say the Bible says differently. The Bible says that discipline is supposed to feel not good. Hebrews 12:11 talks about discipline. It says, for the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. There does need to be an element of some sort of pain, whether that is physical pain, a little newborn that you're slapping on the wrist, whether that's they're getting older and so the discipline needs to get a little bit harder because guess what? My 4-year-old boy, I can slap his wrist all day. He doesn't care. He's gotten tougher, thankfully. But then as they get older, okay, I'm taking away things. I'm taking away rights. I'm taking away your opportunities to play this game or to do that thing. Discipline needs to involve some sort of pain. And guess what? It hurts to do it. It's not fun. You shouldn't be saying, yes, I get to take that away from my child, or yes, I get to inflict some sort of pain on my child. No, if that is the case, then we got a major problem in the opposite direction. That is not okay. But we need to do this. We need to discipline well. We need to not be afraid. And there are countless proverbs on this as well. Proverbs 13:24, whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. Are you diligently disciplining your kids? Proverbs 19:18, discipline your son, for there's hope. Do not set your heart to put him to death. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him. Proverbs 22:15. There's also hope in discipline. Psalm 118, verse 18. The Lord has disciplined me severely, but he has not given me over to death. That is a great passage. We discipline in love because we want to curb and direct behavior to show them this is not good. If you continue with that behavior, if you continue with that mindset, that attitude, it will not go well for you. And I want you to turn from that so that you get back to the blessings. That's what I want for you. It's not about inflicting harm. It's not about venting your anger at them. Discipline needs to be biblical and it needs to be effective. Next question, how much adversity do you allow your children to face? How much adversity do you allow your child to face? Again, do you let them handle situations on their own and see how they're doing? Do you let them go out and go outside of the bubble? Do you even realize that you will not have them in that bubble forever? Eventually, they're going to go out into the world, and actually, you're supposed to prepare them for the world. Another part of Psalm 127, it's exactly what God, the imagery that God uses. Children are like the arrows of a warrior. What does the warrior do with arrows? Hold them and keep them tight in the quiver. Oh, we're just going to keep you safe here? No, these are to be used. These are to go out and be effective. So are you allowing them to see that kind of adversity? See what other people have done. I mean, you got John the Baptist going out in the wilderness for 40 years. Is that what it was? I don't even remember. Long time. He's going out there. Doesn't seem fun, but guess what? That adversity helps to build some character here. Are you trying to keep them from every bad thing? Are you trying to make sure that if they just have the right sleep schedule and if they just can not have that bad influence and they never see anything bad, then they'll be okay? No, we're fooling ourselves. No, it's not how it works. Now, we don't throw them out to the wolves, but we do make sure that they are going to have some adversity in their life. Lastly, on this one, another question, how much do you push your children? How much are you pushing them? How much are you pushing them to do things that they don't want to do? How much are you telling them, no, you need to go be a part of this thing because it's important? I remember one of the most impactful times for myself was when my dad said, hey, you agreed to do something for this summer. For 3 months, you signed up and you said, I will be there for the entire summer. And I came back halfway through. And my dad said, no, you need to be a man of your word, go back and finish out the job that you said you would do. And he was so convinced of that, he then got in the car, drove me all the way up to basically Sequoia, and then drove himself back so that I could go finish my job. Ruined his day. But guess what? It taught me something. It showed me, oh, he's serious about this, and so I need to be serious about this. I need to take that seriously. How much are you willing to push your kids? Is it, oh, well, they don't really feel like going to church. They're a little bit tired. You know what? It's okay. Would you deal with that in every area of the world? In every area? Well, they don't feel like going to school today, so it's okay. Just don't go to school. You're not really feeling it. It's fine. No. You, as a good parent, a good father, are going to say, no, get in the car. We're going. I'm going to push you because you need to do this. It is important. And as you do that for them, they will learn. They will understand, oh, Dad's serious about this. This is a non-negotiable for him. He does take this seriously. I need to be a part of it. We need to do all of these things. But just as Pastor Elliott and Pastor Matt were saying, we can view that person as the idol. We can hold on to them and want to hold on to them and just say, oh, I just want to sit here and I just want to love them and I just want to do everything for them. And yes, we should sacrifice. Yes, we should do all those. But we need to do it in the right way, a godly way, not the way that the world tells us to do it. But you can also turn and look at the image of a father and say, well, I get praise when my children do well. I am known for what my kids do, and there is an element of that is correct. That is true. You can tell a lot about a man by the way that his kids act. But do you get your pleasure from the way that they're presented? Pastor Elliott brought it up earlier. Do you want to have the perfect cookie-cutter family that you can present to everyone to say, look at how great of a father I am. Look how good I am. Look, my children all went to the Ivy League schools. Look, my children all do all these extracurricular activities. Look at this. Look at my kids. And you gain pleasure from that? No, you're using your children. That's also not your job. We have the sister passage of Ephesians, Colossians 3:21. Colossians 3:21 says, fathers, do not provoke your children. Same thing as Ephesians. But then it says, lest they become discouraged. Fathers, don't discourage your kids by using them, by treating them as tools for your own propping up, for your own perfect little picture, for your image that you want to give off to the world. We cannot do that. I was talking with someone earlier this week, and they said that is exactly how this person in their family, a relative, lived, and that's what they did with their kids. Their children all went to the Ivy League schools. They were all the 4.8+ GPAs, and they did all the extracurriculars, and they did all the music. They can each play 3 different instruments, and they all know 2 different languages, and all of these things. And they were just kind of laughing at it because they were like, yeah, one of them, they did all these things. They got the degree. They have their master's even, and then they got laid off, and they've been jobless for 7 months now. And they had to move back in with mom and dad. You have no control over your child's future, truly. You can point them in the right direction. You can discipline them. You can instruct them, and that's your job. But you cannot play God over them. So point number 2, you can write down this. Do not exceed your role as father. Do not try to control and be their God. Be their father instead. That's the next sub-point under there. Be their father, not their God. Your job as a father is to faithfully instruct them, discipline them, point them to Christ. That is your job. Don't try to be their God. Don't try to bend their will to you. But what you should be doing is pointing them to God and then faithfully asking God to change them, to save them. Are you asking for that? Is that what matters most to you, their salvation? Or is it getting that 4.0? Is it how they look? What's most important? And does that show up in the decisions that you make? Because it's easy to say it in this room right now. But when push comes to shove and schedules are colliding and you're looking at the time and you're looking at your finances, what do we spend the money on? Where do we send our kids? What do we do with them? What are we choosing? Is it their salvation or something else? Another question that you can ask to see, is this me? Could there be this in my heart? Am I idolizing this title and this role of father? Are you often harsh with your kids? That's exactly what this passage is looking at of Colossians 3:21. Don't provoke your kids. You don't want them to be discouraged. Are you often harsh with them? Are you trying to bend them to your will? Are you trying to just make them do what you want to do, or make them be who you want them to be? There can be a good element of that if it is a Christ-like person that you want them to be, but you can't even make that happen. You should be lovingly pointing them to trust, love, and obey God. That's what it should be. The punishment that you dole out should never be in anger, should never be a retribution for what they did. Well, you did this against me, or you didn't meet my needs, and so therefore I'm going to punish you. No, that is not appropriate by any means. It is wrong. Another question: how often do you praise and encourage your children? Just think of the converse. If you don't want them to be discouraged, what do? Encourage them. How often are you telling them, hey, you did a good job. Hey, I'm seeing growth in you. One of the ways that we see an idol is it never satisfies. You can get your kids to that point where they've got the 4.0, and then you start to look around and see, wait a minute, all those kids, they have a 4.3. You're not living up to it, and so I'm not satisfied. And you don't give encouragement. You don't give praise. What do we see of God being the good father? God, on 2 separate occasions, publicly says, this is my son with whom I am well pleased. That would be a great thing for you to do as a father. And please just note that when you talk about your kids, I don't care if they're in the other room, they're listening and they hear you. I've seen many times where someone, a parent, whoever, a father, will say something about their child, and I will just see the child fall. That's what my parent thinks of me. That's what my dad said about me. Be careful. There are times that are appropriate to talk about someone. If you need to talk with a teacher about something, anything like that, sure. But just be careful that you are not disappointing and not disappointing, but discouraging your children. Lastly, last question here. How do you talk about your children to others? Which is what I was just getting at. How do you talk to your children? How do you talk about your children to others? Sorry. And then what are you directing them to? Another question on there. What are you directing them to? Are you just wanting them to accomplish things? Or are you saying, no, I want you to be Christ-like. I want you to grow in character. I want you to understand who God is and what he's done for you. That is what a father's role is, to direct those children by instruction and by discipline, turning them to God so that they might be saved. That is what we need to do if we're going to be good, faithful fathers. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Pastor Elliott. We're going to keep going here.
All right, guys, real quick, I'll just give you number 6, and then we're just going to hop right into the Q&A. We'll probably go a little bit over 3. If you got a hard stop at 3, feel free to just head on out. We understand if you have to do that, but we want to be able to answer as many questions as we can. Number 3, we just want you to grow in the stewardship of your family. That's, if you're not going to idolize it, just grow in the stewardship of your family. And I'm sure practical questions about that can be asked in the Q&A. So if an idolatry of my family is me using my role or the people in my family as a substitute for God, then a good steward of the family is going to utilize my role to direct and draw the people in my family to the glory of God. That's what I want to do. So I want to utilize what God has blessed me with in order to draw and direct people's attention to the glory of God. Very interesting in Pastor Nate's, his Eli example. The phrase, you seek the honor of your kids, was kavod, the glory. So it's always about directing properly to the glory of God, and that's what we should be doing.